So I will be representing disadvantage. My first disadvantage, A, attacking Syria will hurt the U.S. economy and raise the debt ceiling. My first sub-point, the debt ceiling is already higher than it has ever been. According to Stephen Dinnan, staff writer at Washington Times, WashingtonTimes.com, published on October 18, 2013, U.S. debt jumped a record $328 billion on Thursday, the first day the federal government was able to borrow money under the deal President Obama and Congress sealed this week. The debt now equals $17.075 trillion, according to the figures at the Treasury Department posted on Friday. The $328 billion increase shattered the previous high of $238 billion set 2 years ago. The giant jump comes because the government was replenishing its stock of extraordinary measures, the federal funds it borrowed from over the last 5 months as it tried to avoid bumping into the debt ceiling. Subpoint 2. The government is already struggling to fund itself. According to Victoria Craig, staff writer at FoxBusiness.com, September 6, 2013. In order to keep the government functioning through the end of the fiscal year, which ends on September 30th, Congress must reach some kind of bargain before members leave for a fall break, and a continuing resolution is almost certain, according to a research note from the Potomac Research Group Wednesday. But that's not all. The federal government is once again rubbing up against the dreaded debt ceiling. The $16.7 trillion cap to the nation's borrowing power, an issue must be addressed before 2013 draws to a close. The Treasury Department is currently undertaking so-called extraordinary measures to allow the country to continue funding itself, but Congress will have to vote to raise the cap by mid-October. My third subpoint, even just a limited strike would cost millions of dollars. According to Bryce Colbert, economic policy editor for Think Progress at thinkprogress.org, September 10, 2013, while Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel has estimated that an operation will cost tens of millions of dollars, the price tag could be much higher. The action of administration is talking about taking would be limited. The action the administration is talking about taking would be a limited strike, which would likely be similar to the NATO operation in Libya 2011. Although there isn't talk of implementing a no-fly zone as there was in Libya, which is costly, but this sort of action would still cost hundreds of millions in weapons. The first weeks of the operation in Libya cost $600 million, $340 million of which went to munitions. Each Tomahawk land attack missile cost $1.4 million. Meanwhile, the Navy USS Nimitz and other vessels were scheduled to return home from deployment, but they have now been ordered to remain within striking distance of the country at an estimated cost of $25 million per week. If the U.S. fires missiles and those ships engage in combat, it'll cost an additional $30 million per week. Raising the debt ceiling, my second disadvantage, B, raising the debt ceiling means even more cutbacks on federal funded programs. First point, the budget cuts will cause an 8% decrease in funding for programs focused on child health. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, October 5, 2013, on March 1, 2013, a set of across-the-board budget cuts to most federally funded programs, including some focus on maternal and child health, took effect. The cuts, known as sequestration, apply equally to defense and non-defense programs and will devastate already fragile budgets for key pediatric programs at a time when 22% of U.S. children live in poverty. If the cuts are enacted, funding levels are estimated to be about 8% below of last year's levels. So point 2, budget cuts will reduce funding for food stamps by $39 billion during the next decade. According to Christopher Doring and Paul Singer, staff writers at USAToday.com, the House approved the Republican plan Thursday to cut food stamps by $39 billion during the next decade, setting up a showdown with Democrats over the program used by nearly 48 million low-income Americans. The House voted 217 to 210 for the bill that cuts nearly twice as much from food stamps as the bill the House rejected in June. It is also far more than a Senate measure passed earlier this year that would trim about $4.5 billion in spending. The bill failed to draw the support of a single Democrat, many of whom have said the steep cuts will erode a key safety net depended on by families with children, seniors, veterans, and people looking for work. My third disadvantage, C, cutbacks on federal programs will cause more hardships for American citizens. Subpoint 1, budget cuts have affected many cancer patients. According to Jennifer Liberto, writer at CNN.com, budget cuts have led to unexpected consequences for cancer-stricken seniors undergoing chemotherapy treatment. Hundreds of independent cancer clinics have either cut back or are in the process of determining whether the Medicare patients because federal spending cuts trimmed reimbursement rates for pricey chemotherapy drugs. So point two, 125,000 people will be put at risk of becoming homeless due to cuts in housing programs. According to Annie Lowry, reporter in the Washington Bureau of the New York Times, unless a deal is reached to change the part of the cuts, housing programs will be hit particularly hard, with about 125,000 individuals and families put at risk of becoming homeless. The Department of Housing and Urban Development estimated an additional 100,000 formerly homeless people might be removed from emergency shelters or other housing arrangements because of the cuts, the agency said. My third subpoint, SNAP participants will have reduced availability to purchase food. According to Stacy Dean, Vice President for Food Assistance Policy, these cuts will likely cause hardship for some SNAP participants, who will include 22 million children in 2014, 10 million of whom live in deep poverty with family incomes below half of the poverty line. I now stand up for confidence.
All right, Betsy. This one's supposed to be yours.
Can you read me the piece of evidence that says that the debt ceiling will be raised, please?
That it will be raised?
That it needs to be raised.
Well, in my first point, I said that the U.S. debt jumped a record $378 billion on Thursday. It is now equal to $17.075 trillion.
Okay, anywhere does it say that we'd be cutting any money from our defense budget?
No, it does not.
In any of your, from 2D down to, from your second disadvantage, anywhere down to your third disadvantage, and any of your points, does it say that any amount of that budget will be cut from the defense?
No, it doesn't. But my argument was that it would cut money from federal funded programs that help the American citizens who need it.